We speak. Our words. We listen.
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 Spectrum Voices is an autistic radio production for autisticradio.com. Today I have a really positive story, and to some extent it was a surprise to me. I didn't expect my experience with the post-diagnostic program created under the fund, created to throw some money out there and ask organisations to take a meaningful input from autistic people and create a program to reach out to people like myself. I did not expect that when I actually found the program, was enrolled on the program myself, to be as positive a story as I'm now here to tell. In some ways, the positivity comes from the way the fund was organised. The fund asked for a meaningful input from autistic people, and it left the different organisations to interpret that in whichever way they decided to. My fear always is, when these things happen, that there are good intentions that don't get followed up. But let me tell you what happened on Sunday from a personal point of view. Somebody who has known about their autism for 5 years, was diagnosed 4 years ago, and has been left entirely outside the system without any support or any information to help me along the way in discovering my autism. I got picked up and I was put on the scheme for a group called Autism Initiatives. Autism Initiatives is a big charitably based organisation that in Scotland, it's one of the more well-established groups. And so, as an autistic person, you would tend to look at that quite sceptically. You would tend to think, oh no, here I am. Here I'm going to be condescended to again. But as I said, this is a positive experience, and that was not my experience. A small group was invited to a first session on one of these video platforms that we're all getting used to. And right from the beginning, the facilitator made me comfortable because they were explaining to the group that everyone had the choice on how they use the technology. They could have their camera on, they could have their camera off, they could text in the texting boxes that was just a normal part of these things nowadays, something that often gets ignored by the non-autistic community, the ability to text and speak and have your camera on, but all of them being optional. And I have to say that just that first consideration gave a good impression right from the beginning. And I noticed that everybody on the group, besides myself, chose a different method of interpreting that. There were people who, like myself, decided to have their camera on for periods of time and off at other periods of time when they felt different levels of comfortability. There were people who kept the camera off all the time and kept on mute all the time and didn't speak. But they also chose to use the text function. And the text function was completely integrated into the whole meeting. It wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't let's just go and see what's on text. The person facilitating gave as much care to looking at the text as they did listening to the occasional person who spoke or the occasional person who went on camera to raise a hand. So right at the beginning, a good impression was given to all of the participants, and choice was given to all the participants. And I think that relaxed everybody. The group, from what I could tell, was mainly people in my age group. Some people in that age group are not really that up to date with technology, but the facilitator made that not an issue and helped people through. Guys, you're here with me at the moment, listening to what I found out. This start, this way of opening up the communication, is it just important to me, or do you see things in this that would have been important to you?
I might, depending whether a group feels more quick-fire, slow processing like me and thoughtful, might affect whether I want my expressions watched by folks who might react to them too quickly and hastily, and therefore whether to have my video on or not. So, despite the scene not having solved all wrong interactions between people, this is certainly attending to the comfort issues that go with them, the processing. Suppose things have been there for long enough now. They've learned that this type of people affected, you only know when you're on the spot. It's going to go with social anxieties. Online as well, actually the formats seem to make it easy to provide as well. Not easy and psychologically for them to provide rather than actual providability. Because imagine face-to-face session where they'd be equally happy with you looking away. I suppose that's the next challenge.
Yeah, I think that point is interesting, Maurice. I think I was an awful lot more comfortable because it was not a face-to-face group. I think because it was technology-based and because it was in my own home and I was sitting in my own seat and I had all these choices about whether I showed my face, whether I texted or whether I spoke out, it gave me so much more freedom than it would have been if I was in a village hall somewhere with a facilitator coming in and saying, right, we're all going to have a meeting, we're all going to look at each other, we're all going to sit in a group and speak to each other. The actual format of the technology felt to me as though it included me in a way that wouldn't have happened if it was face-to-face.
The important thing about taking part in anything is to feel comfortable in doing so, especially when you're talking about personal experience, especially if you're going to maybe go through, quite emotional and quite difficult conversations for the participation of what you're taking part in. The thing about you get a choice about not need to put your camera on, that you don't need to be seen, is very important. Because even now, as I'm doing this myself, the comfort I have of not being seen, the way that I'm looking when I'm thinking while I'm speaking, like I'm doing now. And that itself, even though I'm within a comfortable group that I know quite well now, because we're going to work together for sort of a wee bit of time, it's still beneficial. Because you don't feel, it's like nobody can see any signals, so it just creates that comfort, because the voice itself is powerful enough without having to be seen, and it can be enough when taking part in something. And it's best when an option like that is provided so that people are as comfortable as possible considering what they're talking about. And not just to take part in it, not just to get through it all, but to enjoy the experience as well and feel fulfilled and positive at the end of that participation. That's worthwhile. Because there's been so many times that people have been involved in such things, research and talking. Many people kind of pouring their heart out in many ways, depending on their experiences, and then feeling that they've done it all for nothing. And then you feel empty with that and frustrated because it's a lot of effort and a lot of energy to talk about yourself in any circumstance, never mind doing it with strangers.
Yeah, Harry, I think one of the things about the format was that you could be absolutely silent and you could read what other people were saying or listen to the presenter, look at the slides, and that was okay. Nobody said to you, "Oh, Jules, what do you think on this?" Or, "Has anybody got any questions?" I'm opening it up to the floor and then expecting one person after another to join in. There was none of that stress. And it meant that if you started with I'm going to observe and listen, you then got the option to go up a scale if you wanted and maybe text something. And then if you wanted to go up a scale, you could perhaps put your mic on and then say something out loud if that's what you wanted to do. But conversely, people who put their camera on turned their camera off and they went down the scale, or people who had spoken went down the scale and then decided to use the text instead, all according to how they were feeling and how they were regulating themselves at the time. So there were different steps of communication, different types of communication that you could move from one to the other very easily. And I feel that because it was online, because that was possible, it was such an improvement over what would have been a possibility of a face-to-face where you've got nowhere to hide.
Yes, that's the thing that has been done in the past. Going somewhere and then taking part, and if you don't take part, eventually you're just sitting quite quiet. It's like people are looking, why are you sitting silent or keeping quiet, even though that you're just observing. And then may take part, but you feel that there's a pressure on you, someone can actually see you. But the option of being online, you're right, it creates that comfort. It actually helps people open up. It certainly helps me when I've been involved in many different things. The comfort of being in their own home, the choice of to be seen or not, the choice whether to actually be at the table virtually in terms of, because if you're in a room, you've got to, or you feel you've got to sit there and not move, even for comfort breaks or anything, even though most of these things, or all of them, I should say, there's that opportunity, but you feel embarrassed if you move just one little bit. So online gives you that freedom, and that freedom helps you feel more comfortable to take part in things. So online's such a great benefit for many people. Very inclusive.
When we talk about autism, we talk about communication, deficits, difficulties, problems, differences, all these different words, all with different nuances. But what I saw was the facilitation of, as far as I could tell, all of the people who were taking part, all of whom were autistic, and the communication was working incredibly well. It was like the online skill of the presenter was a sophistication that I don't normally come across when I'm dealing with non-autistic contributors to, say, this program. They really got it, the presenter, and I think the reason they got it was because they were autistic themselves. I think right at the start, they made the dynamic work solely because they were autistic. They didn't have to say they were autistic right at the beginning. They were already facilitating before they actually explained that to us. we're often told that the communication of autistic people is a deficit because it doesn't fit what's expected. And when non-autistic people have transferred themselves to online communication, they've taken all of their normal ways of dealing with things with them. Whereas it seemed to me that the autistic person who was dealing with this type of communication had embraced the difference of the communication and was very sophisticated, bringing people in who were in text or dealing with people who were also on camera and bringing all of those strands together. Whereas when I've seen it done by non-autistic people, it's always been much clunkier. Is that something other people have experienced, or is this just personal to me?
I think it's personal, but we've all encountered a couple of cases of understanding autistic people. I just keep the correlations of being caring ones as well as autistic ones, because there's plenty who aren't and who don't bother. It's good they're given the jobs when it does bother, though.
Right from the off, I think the participants started in a good place. And it was about the explanation of the communication and the way the facilitator managed that really started everybody off in a very positive way, and a positive way of dealing with things in a comfortable way. And when I tried to look around and see how other people were reacting and communicating, it was very evident that people had found as comfortable a place as they could when they were essentially amongst a group of strangers. And I suppose the second part of that, of how the person achieved that, was because they did explain that they were autistic themselves, and their ability from the inside was showing such an empathy with everybody that you felt as though much of the communication difficulties that you might have had in a mixed space were dealt with for you. They just melted away. You were with somebody different to you, but on your wavelength. Somebody that would notice slight discomforts with people and deal with them in a way that you had to have empathy with the person to achieve it. I saw a person who was empathetic with every single person who was joining with them, and that felt very different, very holistic, very all-encompassing in comparison to what I expected. Do we come across these groups very often? I haven't.
No, I mean, the experience that I've had is there's a lot of good intention to get people involved. It's always, as what you described earlier, clunky attempt at doing so. So it's nice to hear that in your experience, the kind of thing you've attended is a lot more free flowing, and the facilitator gets it in terms of being inclusive, in terms of letting things flow and letting things be comfortable. Because sometimes things can seem a bit forced, especially if there's people overthinking of maybe we've got to make sure that everybody's included here. So they try and force inclusion, without really meaning to be that way. It's like, so many people, if it's, they're saved, somebody else has to have their say, like give an opportunity to somebody to put text even. It's like a bit forced, a bit, not scripted, but forced is certainly the word. And it's good that can be done without being forced. Because the worst thing is to do, even without the intention of doing so, is to force someone to communicate, especially for something it's, it's difficult and it's talk about your own experiences.
Yeah, nobody seemed to feel forced. But there was something where everybody seemed to want to engage. Everybody wanted to speak to this person, or, well, obviously that's not quite true. More people than I expected wanted to engage. More people than I expected wanted to say their piece, and discussions happened between people in a way that was facilitated. It felt to me as though the person who was leading was kind of living their best life in that moment. I was able to watch somebody doing really good work and enjoying that they were doing really good work and knowing that they were really doing a bit like a sportsman who has trained and trained and trained, and they're at the top of their game, and then they do the performance, and then it's there, and they're loving it, they're in it, they're in the moment, they are being that, they're being that champion. It was infectious, because the person doing it was loving doing it. They were there to do it. And you can't fake that. It was so engaging to see somebody who was prepared, skilled, and into it. You don't get that by reading about autism from a book and then trying your hardest because you want to empathize with a population. You do get that from being both autistic and, in this case, also somebody who uses the label of ADHD as well, from the inside. A really different experience to what I was expecting. I'm very happy to continue with going to these meetings and learning more about my autism through them, perhaps, though I have been out there for 5 years, so I've probably read quite a lot already. What I'm unhappy about is the missed opportunity, because what this person is creating and how they're doing it could be replicated so easily. There are so many autistic people who could become experienced in facilitating in the way that this person, Sarah Gardiner, was. If we had been given a meaningful input opportunity to the Autism Network's presentations, we as a group would have been able to have brought some of what Sarah does to their offering, and the money that has been spent would have been more effective, and the people who joined their groups would have returned again. I am quite sure that when I go back to my next meeting with this group, that by far the majority of the people who were there will return. It felt as though when they were leaving their first session, they were positively saying, I'm looking forward to the next session. We as a group have the skills that we have not yet practiced to be another Sarah. And I'm sure there are thousands of autistic people out there that could do the same thing.
Just saying Lindsay's not another Sarah. She does that I can see. It's good experience in the aunt's time.
We don't know. All we know is that experience from autistic people other than Lindsay was not taken on board, and I feel missed opportunities from groups that did not embrace the meaningful input for autistic people are unlikely to have come up to the standard of what I've witnessed. What I've learned from this so far is that when funding was offered for a post-diagnostic program that requested a meaningful input from autistic people, I feel as though I have received part of a program that does include a meaningful input from autistic people. And not only that, it met the gold standard of having a facilitator that could fully empathise with other autistic people because they were autistic. Is that a fair summation?
That is something that I would hope that would be the case. I would certainly think that there'd be more understanding, because obviously not everybody knows every circumstance, but the understanding's there, and then the preparation's there, and the mindset's there to be inclusive to everyone and not be forceful and not to be rushed either. Just a sort of gentle journey that you would give the opportunity for as many people as possible to be comfortable in, especially if there's opportunities to communicate in different ways, which is vital to such a project such like this.
It feels to me that the funders did their absolute best. They realised there was a real need for people like myself and many others who have come to their autism late in life. They realised there needed to be a support programme following diagnosis because people are dumped. They just don't feel as though there's any follow-up. And they can go to some strange places to get their information. And the other thing that the funders did was that they asked for a meaningful input from autistic people. And what I'm starting to see is that some of the organisations that received that money are creating very, very good models that could be expanded, used, made cheaper, and rolled out to a much wider group of people. What I think I will wonder over the next few weeks is when all the money has gone, when all the funding has dried up and nobody can be paid to do these things anymore, how can the autistic community create a model that continues the work, that takes on some of the information and the methods and the models and expands it in a way that will reach more and more people under our own steam, under our own energy? Maybe that's the challenge for autistic people as we go into a future of cutbacks, reductions in services, people who've worked in autism losing their jobs and moving on to other careers. Maybe we're going to have to try and pick up with what we've seen and make it work ourselves.
That's finding the opportunities. That'll be part of it.
You're right, Morris. It is about finding the opportunities. At the moment, there are chinks where some people in autism really genuinely want a meaningful input from us. There are people in the communities of professionals who can see the good, who could recognise it and want to encourage it. But I feel also there's a status quo out there of people protecting their jobs and not wanting to change, because allowing autistic people to be part of their own destiny, to be part of their own enabling themselves as groups, it doesn't fit with many of the structures that we've got already created, and it brings us into conflict with what's already there. It's a shame, but it's a truth. We are now competing against the autism professionals in some places. Autistic professionals are competing with autism professionals. Let's just hope we can get the best out of this situation as we go forward and cooperate as best we can. First thoughts on the post-diagnostic programme. A really positive experience. I'll tell you more when I know more. This has been a Spectrum Voices production for autisticradio.com. Let's hear more good stories. Bye for now.